with Andy Wint. Haven't been here for ages and ages. Moramai, Philly Gawne.
Moramai, Andy.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
What's up to? What? I know nothing about this. What are we doing today?
Well, I was hoping you were going to be able to tell me, but yeah, we've got quite an interesting set of items on the programme. One thing, obviously, that's happening today is Shennagus Dew. That's happening down in Ramsey, so we can talk a little bit more about that. I know someone was on a few weeks ago to talk about Shennagus Dew. Also, Manx National Heritage, for the first time, I think, in its history, but certainly the first time in a very long time, is opening the Manx Museum today, and that's going to be open through the summer on a trial period. So, Manx National Heritage Manx Museum open probably from now for the rest of the day. So get down if you've managed to have your breakfast and looking for something to do before dinner. Go down and have a look at the Manx Museum.
Great. It's Easter Sunday. It is. It's Easter Sunday, and everything's happening, including the Manx Museum being open, as Moghrey Jedoonee, Moramai, and Phil Gawne is on today. Phil, you were talking about Inuits. First of all, where Inuits are...
Yeah, well, those are the sort of the native people from the north of America, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, they're having a bit of a difficult time as the ice starts to melt.
Did they used to be called Eskimos?
Some people would call them Eskimos.
Yes.
Yeah.
You wouldn't call them Eskimos nowadays.
No, I think Inuit is their native name for themselves. So that's probably why they've gone with that. But there's a very interesting thing here, and it kind of ties in quite nicely with the oral history traditions of many ancient languages, and indeed Manx, of course. I certainly remember having some fantastic times, particularly down at Ballinorris, where all the farmers used to gather on a Sunday morning. And that storytelling tradition was still very much alive there. I was only relatively small and probably not as interested as perhaps I should have been, but I do remember the fantastic recollection that all these farmers would have, and they'd be telling tales about people from generations back as vividly as if they were happening at that very time. But this story about the Inuit oral historian, this was a story that appeared in The Guardian, and the Inuit oral historian actually pointed the way to Franklin shipwrecks, but he's died aged 58. So Louis Kamukach, apologies if I've mispronounced his name, who tied ancestral stories to an ill-fated 1840s expedition to find the Northwest Passage, is to be honoured in Canada. Growing up in the Canadian Arctic, Louis Kamukach was captivated by tales from Inuit elders of rusted utensils strewn along a remote shore and mysterious white men using ropes to haul a large ship through the ice. Years later, he realised there was a striking resemblance between the stories of his youth and historical accounts of the ill-fated expedition of Sir John Franklin, whose 2 ships and 129 crew members vanished while searching for the Northwest Passage in the 1840s. Kamukach compared Inuit stories with explorers' logbooks and journals to develop a working theory of where the ships might be. He shared these thoughts with Canadian archaeologists and was eventually vindicated in a spectacular fashion when, using his directions, divers located the HMS Erebus in 2014 and 2 years later the Terror. Both ships were found exactly where Kamukach had predicted. Archaeologists and historians have paid tribute to the Inuit oral historian who helped solve a mystery that had confounded explorers for generations after he died this week, aged 58. So we can continue a little bit more about that after a break. It's very interesting that in-depth knowledge that had been passed down from generation to generation back from the 1840s right the way through to the 21st century, had managed to locate exact locations for these.
Interesting how powerful oral history is, though, isn't
absolutely.
it? It's one thing we tend to, because nowadays everything is online and digital and everything, but that oral tradition is ubiquitous everywhere in the world, isn't it?
Yes.
It's an oral tradition.
And I suppose the current generations, you don't have to remember anything, because anything that you need to know, you just click it into Google, and the next thing you know, you've got the answers. So the need to remember is no longer there, I suppose. Added to which, there's an awful lot more to do of a night time than sit and listening to oral historians telling you
but
about
interesting,
your history.
as you say, it may affect the way people even use their memory nowadays.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. I'm as bad as anyone for being addicted to phones and tablets and the like, but I do fear for the future. I don't think we've quite learned how to use the internet. It's like we've been launched off on the push bike without the stabilizers. Not really sure. This generation, not really sure what it's all going to bring in the future. But hopefully we'll be around to find out what happens.
Use your memory. That's the important thing. Try and remember things, and try and of course, interesting. I think it was in the past couple of weeks they've been having stories about how they're putting very young children into old people's homes.
Yes, that certainly helps, and also again on this whole memory thing, actually bringing in historical artifacts, not too old, going back to the younger days of older people. That also helps, because people love to remember things. They actually like doing that, and they feel an awful lot better when they see objects. They again, listen to children. It brings back memories, usually fond memories of their youth, which is a great great for improving everyone's general well-being and health.
Phil Gawne and Andy Wint, Moghrey Jedoonee, Moghrey Jedoonee. First things first, Manx for Happy Easter.
Yes, very remiss of me not to wish everybody a Ceist Vai Eru. Ceist Vai Eru, which is Ceist is the word for Easter, Vai, good, and Eru, on you plural. I'm being polite this morning. So Ceist Vai Eru, a good Easter on you.
Okay. We're back to the Inuits and the oral tradition.
Yes, again, fascinating really to hear that this oral history managed to, or this oral historian who'd listened to stories from way back in the 1840s had managed to locate the exact place where two ships from the 1840s has actually sunk. So this is Louis Kamukach, an Inuit historian who's recently died. So he was someone who devoted 3 decades of his life to understanding the puzzles and the clues surrounding the disappearance of the two ships, said John Geiger, the president of the Royal Canadian Geographic Society, calling Kamukach the last great Franklin searcher. Kamukach was born at a seal hunting camp and brought up in nomadic camps for the first decade of his life. Kamukach was long fascinated by the stories he heard from elders. With no written language for generations, Inuit have relied on oral history as a means of preserving knowledge of their surroundings, as well as unique and noteworthy events. For years, European explorers and historians ignored that oral history, but Kamukach became convinced it was key to discovering the location of the Franklin shipwrecks. At least 36 expeditions from 1847 to 1859 searched for Franklin's lost ships, with dozens more in the 20th century, and all ended in failure. In recognition of his relentless dedication to showcasing Inuit culture and history, Kamukach was recently appointed to the Order of Canada. He was also a Fellow of the Royal Canadian Geographic Society and its honorary vice president. The society plans to create a medal in his name, said Geiger. So again, this was from an article that appeared this week in The Guardian, and again, really fascinating to hear how oral history over these generations can actually hold on to really relevant facts about the history of very important events that took place.
No written language, though.
Absolutely. So none of this was written down. This was all passed from sort of an elder to a younger person over these generations. So it's really quite amazing that, as I say, dozens and dozens of people had been looking for these shipwrecks.
Yes.
But the Inuit oral history was able to point them to the exact spot.
Crikey. That's, but again, going back to no written language, again, that's common in peoples across the world, isn't it? Because knowledge being power, knowledge was very expensive. Paper was very expensive, and obviously not many people knew reading and writing.
Absolutely, and of course, one of the reasons that Manx Gaelic has become so different from the Scottish and Irish versions is because from around about the end of the Viking period in the Isle of Man, when the English lords finally won out over the Scots, we had no contact with Ireland or Scotland, and indeed because they were English lords, there was no patronage of the Manx language. The Scottish and Irish lords would be paying for poets to write poems and sing songs and all the rest of it. Write histories even. Probably not that dissimilar to the cabinet officers' media unit, but perhaps less flowery language. But yeah, because Manx didn't have any of that, our language became a much simpler language, considerably less vocabulary and considerably simpler grammatical structures.
Yes.
So I always, on the occasions I used to go away to Gaelic conferences, there would be maybe 20 Irish delegates, 16 Scottish delegates, and then me from the Isle of Man. And I would always say, but of course you should follow Manx, because our language has ditched all this complicated, unnecessary stuff, and ours is a simple, sharp, lean, mean language for the 21st century. And you can imagine how well those sorts of comments would have gone down. Yeah.
Look at that time, it's 28 minutes past 10. Happy Easter in Manx again is...
Ceist Vai Ort.
Phil Gawne's here. It's Moghrey Jedoonee on Manx Radio from the Isle of Man, and back to the Inuits.
Yes, we'd left this with basically the oral historian Louis Kamukak, who had, using generations worth of stories, had managed to locate the exact place where two shipwrecks had taken place in the 1840s, and Louis Kamukak had been recognised by receiving the Order of Canada. So Kamukak spent much of his adult life in the community of, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce this, it's spelled Gjoa. So what would you say? Gjoa? Gjoa? Gjoa, I don't know. Gjoa Haven, anyway, a hamlet above the Arctic Circle, working as a teacher and educating youth about the importance of oral history. He was concerned that the stories be passed along to young Inuit and that they wouldn't be lost. He wanted to preserve the wisdom that comes from people who have lived for centuries on the land and understand it innately. Until his death, Kamukak remained steadfast in his pursuit of the Franklin remains. He knew of stories in which Inuit hunters witnessed the burial of a ship's captain, which Kamukak suspects was Franklin. As recently as 2 months ago, he was planning to return to the Arctic this summer and continue his search for the tomb of the grave of Sir John Franklin. He's someone whose search for understanding of the terrible disaster really never ended. It was with him until the very last days of his life. And of course, Louis Kamukak died very recently at the age of 58. But yeah, very fascinating story, really, and just shows you a lot about native traditions, native communities, and how people used to remember things in days gone by, and the importance of of oral tradition. And of course, if we go back far enough, the Druids were told only had passed on traditions. They didn't write things down. Writing it down meant it didn't have as much power as if it was kept in your head. I suppose it was also easy to manipulate the thing if it's in your head.
Well,
but also the breast laws in the island again used to be passed from Deemster to Deemster. It wasn't so much of the written down stuff. It was very much people had to remember. It was an oral tradition. So fascinating stuff.
Interesting. So as you were saying, the power of the memory as well, and the way that people use their memory nowadays. Do you remember that game there used to be as kids? What's called Kim's game, where you had to look at a tray of objects and then remember what the tray, 15 objects on a tray, and try and remember what was on the way.
Yeah.
If people did that nowadays, what people's memories are actually like. And years ago, when photographs used to be something that you took, had developed, and you kept. Nowadays, everybody takes 20 photographs a day.
Yes,
Years ago, people used to take very meaningful photographs. And you get a box of photographs out, and you'd look at them. You'd look at photographs, and memories would come flooding back.
Do you think we're getting old? Do you think that's the trouble?
Well, I was hoping you wouldn't mention that. What was it? Did you say GJOA?
Yeah.
Jerby. I've just looked at
Jerby, all right, okay.
Jerby, that's it.
Yes,
now,
that's off the
good news
North
today.
Coast.
You were saying the Manx Museum's open.
Yes, the Manx Museum is open. This is the first time, certainly, as a sort of a continual thing that the Manx Museum's been open on the Sunday. It's being open. It's been trialled over the summer, and that's quite exciting news. And I understand there's some other exciting news as well, in that someone will be appearing at Manx Museum this morning. For security purposes, we can't say who it is, but if you get down to the museum before 12 o'clock, this famous star will be at the museum appearing.
I heard a rumour about that. Now, you're far closer to the seat of power than I'll ever be, but you've obviously... So between 10 and midday?
Between 10 and 12, apparently they'll be appearing on a fairly frequent basis during the morning. So if you get down there before 12, then you'll have an opportunity to see this famous person.
Wow, well, you heard it here first. Phil Gawne gave you that information, just remember that. Phil Gawne is here today. It's Easter Sunday. Kestia vai Eru?
Bonus, almost.
Yeah.
Keist vai Eru.
I haven't used my Manx for a long time, Phil. I haven't used it for a long time.
You're doing well. One thing I suppose I ought to mention just before we get on to one of these other topics is, of course, it's Shenagus Jew. Shenagus Jew means history or heritage traditions today. So it is today. It's also tomorrow. So Shenagus Merach, I suppose we could say. That's all happening. Well, not all happening. Some of it's happening in Ramsey. Let's see. Is it all happening in Ramsey? Yes, it is. All the remainder of the events are happening in Ramsey. But today, there will be a Brastel Rinke Jernach at the Halliamasunach Rumse Buiste Collet Son Geldenus Och. So that's Celtic Showcase. No, that's the. I've got them the wrong way round here, have I? Is that? No, that should be Irish dancing. Yeah, Irish dancing. An Irish dancing class in the Masonic Hall in Ramsey, and thanks to Collet's for their sponsorship. And that will be with the Lawrences, Scran, Berlin, Jurgen. No, that can't be right. I think I've obviously got this mixed up somehow. But there will be Irish dancing classes at the Masonic Hall. And then at 7:30 there's the Cayley, and I suspect that's with Splan. No, it's not. No, I'm sorry. I've definitely got these the wrong way round.
It's online somewhere.
It's online. Where is it? Yeah, I don't know how I've managed to mix them all up. But anyway, yes, definitely today, 3 o'clock at the. There will be Irish dancing, and there's a Cayley at 7:30. And yeah, you're probably best going on the Shenniger Stew website rather than relying on, on my hopeless notes.
We're talking about the oral tradition.
Yeah, I'd be far better ringing up to you and Garrett and asking them to tell me what was happening rather than...
Garrett! Yeah. I've just thought it's Margaret Garrett.
Yes, of course.
Margaret Garrett.
And we'll get onto that.
We'll come on to that later.
And of course, not to forget as well that there's a very important person down at the Manx Museum today. Manx Museum open all day today for the first time on a Sunday as a trial throughout the summer. So get down there before 12 o'clock and you'll see an appearance from this important star. Another thing that captured my imagination this week was the establishment of a new association called Cetacean Island Association. And what they say is that the Isle of Man is one of the best places in the British Isles to observe whales, dolphins and porpoises from the coastline. The key spots outlined on the map on their website can provide excellent opportunities to watch these animals behaving naturally in their environment. Animals will often come in to the shore extremely close and can be observed with the naked eye. So this new group, Cetacean Island Association, or CIA for short, goes on to say that if you fancy a spot of watching, pack a picnic, sit by the coast and look for whales and dolphins. What a perfect day out. Lots of places outlined on their online map are accessible, and the Sound and Yarble obviously have lovely cafes with superb views over the sea. If you fancy a trip to try and spot some cetaceans, then there are a few important things to remember. Try and go where the sea is calm, as cetaceans can be difficult to see in choppy weather. Take along one of their principal A4 ID guides so you can identify what you see. Take a pair of binoculars if you have them. Dress appropriately for the weather, warm clothes or plenty of sun cream, probably more the warm clothes at the moment. And also look out for disturbance in the sea, such as odd areas of white water being produced, as these may be caused by cetacean activities. Also look out for bird activity, especially diving gannets, and be patient, but don't be disappointed if you don't see anything. So that's from this new group, Cetacean Island Association. We'll hear a little bit more about them after the next break.
All to come on Moghrey Jedoonee, and later on we'll be talking about Margaret Garrett.
Right, yeah. So again, Ceist Vai Eru. Happy Easter on you for anyone who wants to use a bit of Manx today. And of course, the other thing, of course, we should be talking about today is Lair Omagen Avril, April Fool's Day. Lair Omagen Avril. Omagen is the word for a fool. Avril is the word for April. So Lair Omagen Avril would be April Fool's Day. And Ceist Vai Eru, happy Easter on you. Just before the break then, we were talking about Cetacean Island Association. This is a new group. Apparently they've developed some quite amazing technology, including a full-scale model of a basking shark. And this model is apparently looks quite similar to a basking shark, and it can actually be controlled and it can be used to film various activity.
Right.
But Cetacean Island Association, CIA, there have been suggestions that perhaps the filming is being used for more than just monitoring basking sharks. There have been some fairly high-profile cases recently of fishermen being prosecuted for incursions.
Of course,
and
yes.
There are suggestions that perhaps this Cetacean Island Association, CIA, may be a little bit more than it actually at first appears, and perhaps this new
kind of
robotic basking shark is being used to spy on the fishermen. But again, I don't know. Presumably, that would be one for your news team to quiz the fisheries minister on to find out whether there's any truth in that.
The way technology is nowadays, that you're not really surprised at anything, and I would imagine, particularly with the basking shark's a big thing.
Yeah,
You can get a lot of technology inside
You would,
it.
yeah, absolutely. You'd probably be able to listen in as well as your feedback, visual images. So, and I do know that DEFA is certainly very keen to take prosecutions. So it's possible that this is linked.
Interesting, of course, because on the northwest coast you've got the gas pipeline, and on the southeast, of course, just down below us, there's the AC cable that goes to Bispam. So any sort of monitoring or I would imagine it. Yeah,
it's all very possible. So, but yeah, visit the CIA Cetacean Island Association website, and I'm sure you can find more details there.
Okay, stay tuned. Sure, Moghrey Jedoonee vush Radio Vanning. Moramai, dry and bright today, Easter Sunday, with a light east-northeasterly. We're up to 7 degrees. Overnight, the wind's going to increase strong to gale force from the east. It will turn wet with heavy rain overnight into Easter Monday and some snow on the hills. So that wet and windy with snow on the hills first thing tomorrow morning. Strong easterly, easing during the afternoon. The rain's going to die out Easter Monday, and it will turn milder by the evening. Basically, Easter Monday gets better as it goes on. 4 degrees before midday, 9 afterwards. And on Tuesday, intermittent rain on a light to moderate south-southeasterly and 10 degrees. Sunset tonight, 6 minutes to 8. High water is at 1 minute to 1 p.m. today. Low water, 25 to 8 tonight. And the overnight high water is at 20 past 2.
As an emsha Jew, le brau Jew le shallan gial as grianach, gia fes fain ja na ja tui, leis an temprelis giri gus 6 Celsius. Ni an gia njatige gus leidje na gael fain ja fud na hi, as higge de vei fljoch leis flia trum as sneachte en as leidjen. Fljoch, fua as rastach sa tojach merach, leis sneachte en as leidjen richt. Ach ni gia nja leidje sloteel san asta, bi an lia square san chud smoo, as higge de vei smoo bla na sanma. Temprelis just 3 na care sa vora, ach giri gus hacht na nei na sanma sa le. An riet, flia nishes rish gemurt leis gia fes na mianach vain jas na jas, as temprelis 9 na jai Celsius fully.
And happy Easter. Keishtja vai eru?
Keist.
Keist
vai eru. Keist vai eru.
Phil Gawne's here. Phil Gawne's here. He's putting everybody straight. Including
I wouldn't know. Wouldn't know about that. Anyone who's having a go at speaking Manx, in my view, is entirely permitted to mangle the language, but ideally, if you can get it right, it's even better. I should also mention, of course, the show was brought to us today by Culture Vannin and the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee. Culture Vannin, of course, do a great job, and we'll be hearing a little bit more about them later. But one thing, while the news was on, we've just had a mystery caller. They wouldn't leave their name. Talking about the piece we ran just before the news about the Cetacean Island Association, and the mystery listener was very interested, particularly in the robotic basking shark that we were talking about, that Cetacean Island Association has developed, and they said that basically we were suggesting maybe this was actually a ruse to try and catch some of the fishermen who are.
It's basically an underwater drone.
Yeah,
and there are drones everywhere.
Absolutely.
There are drones everywhere.
And it now appears, according to our mystery caller, that there's a crack team of basking sharks being trained to swim from Whitehaven to Ramsey, possibly carrying or smuggling into the island drugs. So his suggestion was that maybe this robotic basking shark is part of the sort of a covert operation to
a narcotic underwater drone. Cetacean Island
Association.
Yeah, the CIA.
Yeah. So that may or may not be true.
Wow.
But we'll no doubt hear more on that
for years they talked about the Miss Isle of Man, didn't they? They talked about, the Isle of Man missing from maps and what have you. And again, that happens everywhere, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah, we've got some interesting... again, this was a piece that appeared apparently in the Britain section of the printed edition of The Economist under the headline Cartographical Controversy. Islanders are sick of being misplaced on maps. There's a word later in this piece that I'm going to have to do a bleep on, but Islanders are worried about their place in the world in the most literal sense. This is about the Shetland Isles. It is 100 miles northeast from John O'Groats to the Shetland Isles, a wind-swept outpost of 23,000 souls. Yet on many maps it looks about the same distance east, with the islands transported in an enclosed box to nearer the mainland, their mistake there, so that less space is taken up by the sea. Locals are unhappy, and Tavish Scott, the Liberal Democrat MSP, has proposed an amendment to a bill devolving power to the islands that would require the Scottish Government to place the islands accurately in official publications. And Tavish Scott goes on to say, given the amount we put into the exchequer over the past 40 years with oil and gas revenues, it's about, and I won't read the exact word out, it's about time they put us in the right place, he says. So yeah, Shetland Isles struggling in similar ways to the Isle of Man, where often we get missed off the maps. Another interesting development that I noticed, again looking through, I'm a great follower of Twitter, and there was a piece that appeared there about the research that's being undertaken on the Atholl papers by Manx National Heritage. Some very interesting stuff, particularly about the relationship between Castletown and Derby Haven, and the use of Derby Haven clearly as a port back when the Lords of Man were holding sway in Castletown. It was a hugely important part of the shipping in of goods into the island. So a very, very big and an important part of the infrastructure. So there's been quite a lot of research undertaken on the Atholl papers over recent years, but there have been some new developments which seem to imply that the goods, when they were landed on the island, landed at Derby Haven, they were stored obviously in the warehouses there, but the road between Derby Haven and Castletown, there was actually a toll gate on the road, and anyone wishing to move the goods from the warehouses at Derby
Well, that
Haven.
would fit in, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Toll gates,
toll goats as well.
Yeah, toll goats, toll bars.
So that's quite an interesting new development that's just been found from the Atholl papers about this ancient toll that used to be applied for any goods that were leaving Derby Haven to go presumably across the island, but particularly to Castletown. So it would appear from the records that the legislation that was put in place that imposes that toll is still in place. It's never been removed from the statute books. So
it's still current.
Yes, absolutely. So that's a very interesting point there. And we'll explore that a little bit further after the next. I don't know. Are we going into an ad break or music?
I don't know. What would it's one of those days today, Phil.
I love the relaxed nature of this show.
Oh crikey, yes, we're horizontal. We are. I know what I'll do. Yeah. I'll do a few What's Ons.
The What's On Guide, brought to you by Blackfoot Financial Services.
It's open today. The Great Union Camera Obscura is open just below us here on Douglas Head, entertaining for over 100 years. View Douglas Harbour and the whole of Douglas Bay, and be amazed at the colourful, true-to-life images with those amazing lenses presenting a mysterious panorama. It's open today from 1 till 4 and tomorrow 11 till 4. £2 for adults. Accompanied children are free. Here on Douglas Head, the Great Union Camera Obscurance, the Victorian Society, I think, are in charge there. Live music tonight at the Legion in Douglas. Brown Sugar play live from 9:30 onwards. And tomorrow there's an antique and collectibles fair at St Paul's Church Hall in Ramsey and Market Square from 11 till 4 with lots of dealers and a wide selection of collectibles. That's tomorrow, Easter Monday, 11 till 4 at St Paul's Church Hall. Thanks to Ruth, by the way, who dropped me a note. Hi, Ruth. She said the Camera Obscura is open from 11 today. It's open right now, 11 till 4 today on Douglas Head. And tomorrow, watch the weather. It may not be open tomorrow. So thank you for the update on that, Ruth. I'm a great fan of the Camera Obscura. I love the Camera Obscura.
Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it?
Do you know,
Yeah.
I think there are about 10. I think there are 10 in the entire British Isles.
Right.
And we got one here.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things. I've been on the Isle of Man, 20 years now. And it was there was that big debate about whether it should come back and what have you.
I think it was Pam Crow that eventually bit the bullet and agreed to try and get it
yes.
sort of done.
Yeah,
I may be wrong on that. But
if you think, to have one of only 10 in the British Isles here, they're in London, they're in Edinburgh, but they're on Douglas Head, for heaven's sake. It's such a tremendous bit. And then, technology, that was cutting edge. That was almost witchcraft when you went to see that. Yeah,
it is witchcraft, isn't it?
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Ginny, you don't know where you are tomorrow. Where are you tomorrow?
Well, I'm not sure.
You're in Ramsey anyway,
but what
aren't you?
What I do know is that it wasn't my fault after all about the Shennigus Jew stuff. Shennigus Jew need to get a better translator for their Manx section on their website, because they say in Manx, Jedoonee and Hiedler mi avril, ec tris an asta, Brastel rinke jernach, halje masunak rumse, wiste collet son gjaldenasach, merish the Lawrence's scran Berlinjurg as kiedstjak jai punt. Oh, it's trip, yes. But when you actually go to the English section, it says Sunday the 1st of April, 3 p.m, Celtic Showcase Concert, Peel Centenary Centre, kindly sponsored by Collett's, the Lawrence's Scran, Berlinjurg and Trip, admission £10. So Celtic Showcase Concert, Peel Centenary Centre, not, as it says in the Manx section, Irish dance workshop. So those of you who are wanting an Irish dance workshop, go and see the committee and berate them heartily for getting the Manx wrong. The other thing that's happening today, and now Rud Shennigus Jew, Shen ek Siach del Yes and Yasta, be Cayley Egan Halya Masunach Rumsay, Merish Splan, Rinkeren Kerry as Cayley Mananach, as Kiedstjach to Shen just Tortoson. So at 7:30 this evening, there'll be a Celtic Cayley at the Masonic Hall in Ramsey featuring Splan, the Kerry dancers and Manx Cayley, and admissions will be donations on the door. Also tomorrow, Monday the 2nd of April at 4 p.m, Manx Language and Produce Tasting Workshop, Taste and Chat at the Mitre Hotel in Ramsey. So Shen Jedoonee and Nale mi avril e Caes and Yasta, Brastel Gilg as Blas Troa Natalun, Blas as Tolu Satiost Kroon Aspic Rumsay. And I was asked by the organising committee to be involved with that and do a bit of Manx, but I'm not entirely sure now. I think they were going to confirm with me and they haven't done yet, so if there's anyone listening, if they could let me know whether that's still on. Also, tomorrow afternoon, and again, this is one where I know I'm supposed to be taking part in it, but I don't know exactly where it is, and I was told that I would be told at some point. Lecht, Lorish Custel Lewin, Charmaine, Voice 1696, Kjalla, Kalt Ether, Phillips as Act Screwy and Hark du Leng Jeg. So that's a lecture by Christopher Lewin on a sermon from 1696 linking between Phillips and the Act Screwy, the way of writing of the 18th century. So that's on at 1:30 somewhere in a mystery place in Ramsey. I've just got written down here, Ball and Yach ons Rumsay, some place in Ramsey. So if Christopher Lewin or anybody who knows anything about this is listening, if they could let us know where it is. Otherwise, I won't be turning up for the panel session at 15:15, which is An Gil Gunsa Trera Hit, Manx in the Future. featuring Ben O'Kelly, myself, Daniel Quayle, Christopher Lewin, and various others. So that's happening tomorrow afternoon, somewhere in Ramsey. Ball in Yach on Drumsay. So that's all very good. Just to finish off the Shennigus Dew, then, assuming the Manx is right, and I think the English does back this one up. Tomorrow, Merach, Jedoonee and Na Le Mi Avril, Curraceol, Taiost, Croon and Aspic, Rumsay, Merish, Bisky Brisht, Matt Kelly, Jamie Smith, Mollig Band, Adam Melvin, The Tides, as Reesjack, Kidsjack, just Tortoson. So on Monday, the 2nd of April, 7:30 p.m, Bands Night at the Mitre Hotel in Ramsey, featuring Bisky Brisht, Matt Kelly, Jamie Smith, the Mollig Band, Adam Melvin, and The Tides. And Trip. Admission is donation. So that's Shennigus Dew and the mystery event that's happening on Monday afternoon, which I'm not entirely sure where it is, but it sounds as though it's going to be really interesting
great.
if you're into Manx. However, just before the break, we were talking about
yes, get back to the toll road.
The toll road. So, of course, this ancient toll road, basically goods that were landed at Derby Haven and stored in the warehouses down there. When they left Derby Haven, there was a toll gate, and it does appear from the research that's been undertaken into the Athol papers that toll gate, or the legislation, hasn't been repealed. And in effect, that toll gate can be reopened at any point. So Castletown commissioners, as I'm sure some of your listeners, if not all of your listeners, will be aware, have got some very big plans for the town over the course of the next few years.
This is the bypass, is it?
Well, no, not least is the skate park that they're planning.
Of course,
several £100,000 required for that. I do know that they have tried talking to various local authorities, different bodies in the south, but perhaps not with an awful lot of luck. But I was told by the clerk to Castletown commissioners that the proposal which is going to be announced in the not too distant future, is to reinstate the ancient toll gate.
And of course,
for anyone coming in or out of Derby Haven,
and wouldn't require any legislation.
No, the legislation's already in place.
Yeah,
so
probably one of the oldest laws on the Isle of Man as well.
Absolutely, yes, it's a very ancient law, and as I say, that's been discovered in the Athol papers. Recent discovery there. So, wow, very interesting stuff. On a related note, and bearing in mind this is April Fool's Day, I did read that there's in a recent leak from Port St Mary Commissioners, it's been revealed how they go about choosing their clerk at Port St Mary. Apparently, people are expected to write in to apply. They are then those who are successful in terms of getting through the first sifting stage. They're rolled down Slowallion in a spiked barrel.
Oh, yes.
If they survive, then they're obviously up to the next stage, which is being placed on a ducking stool at the end of the Alfred Pier in Port St Mary. And again, if after being ducked under the water for more than 5 minutes, they survive, then that's how they choose their clerks.
You need guts. You need guts to be a clerk in Port St Mary.
Absolutely,
so
absolutely. It's a very short-lived position, it would appear. So
So it's not the Harry Potter hat or anything. It's a spike barrel down.
Yeah.
And it's the ducking stool.
But again, ma doot me, she le Imogen Avril Tom. It's April Fool's Day today. So.
Is it?
So possibly there's not complete truth.
Well, you never know, do you?
You just don't know.
It's what time is it? 26 minutes to 12. It's Andy Wint standing in and Phil Gawne in charge here at Manx Radio. It's 23 minutes to 12. Lel Imogen Avril and Keistja vai Eru, yeah?
Keist. You keep saying Keistja. Keist vai Eru. But pretty close. And I worry about the way you keep saying I'm in charge, because God help us if that was the case.
Anyway, go on. Can diet affect language?
Well, yeah. I mean, this is again a very interesting piece of research. Isle of Man government during the last term of office produced, I think it was Richard Ronan was the minister at the time, this very interesting food strategy for the island. And there's been quite a lot of research going on behind the scenes at DEFA on the food strategy. And I understand, I not understand, the information seems to have been taken, that they've basically been researching people's eating habits to try and better understand what's going to be required.
Well, they say, don't they, you are what you eat?
Well, yes, yeah. So this was all very interesting, but Culture Vannon asked whether they could extend the survey that was undertaken to find out a little bit more about the people that were being surveyed, and they basically said they wanted to know a little bit more about whereabouts on the island people lived, but also were people Manx speakers or not. So interestingly, I think anyway, certainly as a Manx speaker, it's been found as part of the survey that the people who eat more cheese and onion crisps seem to be more fluent in Manx than people who don't. If you don't like cheese and onion crisps or don't eat cheese and onion crisps, the research has shown that you're very unlikely to speak Manx, whereas if you really like cheese and onion crisps, you're very highly likely to be a
well,
fluent
cheese
Manx
is an
speaker.
important, they've often said there are all sorts of things involved in cheese, and who was it said, it was President de Gaulle of France said, how can you rule a country that produces 250 cheeses? Cheese is really important in terms of diet. There's lots of chemicals within there, so it's entirely plausible that it's involved in kind of linguistic, the kind of mechanics of linguistic from the brain. Cheese does affect the brain. They say if you eat cheese before you go to sleep, you're going to dream.
Yeah. And it's interesting though, because again, obviously the research looked into eating various Manx products together with other products. But it was interesting. It was specifically cheese and onion crisps, not the rather excellent cheeses that. That
there must be the combination between the cheese and the onion.
Yeah. But so this is it's. I mean, obviously, there's still a lot more work that needs to be undertaken on this, and I understand now that Culture Vannon is going to be investing in a program of trialling some Manx-produced cheese and onion crisps using obviously Isle of Man Creamery's cheese, and some Manx onions to see. Try and find out a little bit more about this. Does the cheese and onion crisps in some way stimulate the brain? Do people eat the crisps just before or just after they've been engaged in Manx lessons? Or reading
of course,
Manx?
Being involved in agriculture yourself, my mind goes back to the Royal Show and the Agricultural Show, and the different types of onions that are produced on the Isle of Man.
I mean, obviously the conditions can be a bit difficult for growing onions, so you've got to make sure that you don't have too damp sort of soil for that. And again, it may be there's something in the soil that's affecting this, but it's just a fascinating piece of research, and because the spike was so high. And it was only with Manx speakers that, I think certainly Adrian Kane at Culture Vannon is picking this one up, and hopefully there'll be a lot more work done to find out exactly what sort of cheese and onion crisps. Is this just a pure coincidence, or is there some chemical reaction going on? Again, possibly. If we think back, most Manx speakers in days gone by had the spuds and heron diet. Possibly there's something in the saltiness there.
Potatoes first of all. The potatoes are coming out from
the potatoes. So it's possible that's something. To do
Adrian's well qualified for that, so we'll look forward to. I'm sure he'll get some research together on that, and just to find out what the connection is between Manx cheese and onion crisps and the ability to speak Manx and kind of retain the vocabulary. It's the if you like the tendency towards it, the essence of it. That's fascinating.
And salt and vinegar, totally different result. But cheese and onion, that was the one. So yeah.
Wow, Jedoonee Sunday morning. with the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee, and Phil Gawne is here as well. And we're just trying to figure out the crisps, whether we're going to be stocking those cheese and onion crisps. Certainly they'll be in St John's, won't they?
Yes, I'm sure Culture Vannon will have an ample stock from now on. Indeed, I can just picture the large vehicles packed with cheese and onion crisp boxes turning up.
Tin-walled cheese and onion crisps.
Yeah. We have a mutual, or had a mutual friend, of course, and it was interesting that while we're on the programme, and because there is a sort of a Manx cultural link here, it would be interesting to hear a little bit more about George Bellairs.
Yes.
Of course, our mutual friend was the late Raymond Roberts, who was the nephew of George Bellairs. But it just may be interesting to hear a little bit from yourself about George.
Well, I first got into George Bellairs, as I say, I came to the island 20 years ago, 1998, and did the Man in Line. And I was just chatting about, as a come over, saying how the Manx were adept at keeping the lights under a bushel. And of course, all the Manx people looked at me, gone out. But it's one of those things. Even nowadays, we're talking about why people elsewhere don't understand the Isle of Man. So nothing's changed in 20 years. And I said on air, the best thing that ever happened to Jersey was Bergerac. And isn't it a shame there isn't any sort of Manx Bergerac? Well, immediately, I think the late Sue Richardson was handling the phone calls that day, and she said, there's a guy who won't come on air, but he wants to talk to you afterwards. Anyway, after the show had finished, I picked the phone up, and there was Raymond Roberts. And there started a friendship. Sadly, until Raymond passed away, everybody in the South knew Raymond. Everybody in the agricultural community knew Raymond. He knew everybody. He knew everybody's secrets. And he was a wonderful man. Lived in Colby. And his son John still lives in Colby with his family. And we got to talking about his Uncle Harold, he knew him as. Uncle Harold was a man called Harold Blundell, who retired to the Isle of Man in 1960, in the early 1960s, because he'd been a very high-ranking bank manager in England. He worked for Martin's Bank, the one that was subsumed into Barclays in the late 60s with the rationalisation of the clearing banks. And he was from Heywood in Lancashire. He was a kid born in Heywood in Lancashire, went to Heywood Grammar School, and a person he met there changed his life. He was a master, he was a teacher at Heywood Grammar School called Philip Corlett. He was a Manxman who'd got a degree at Liverpool University, went to teach in Manchester and then into Heywood. And Philip Caesar Corlett changed Harold Blundell's life. He was a little working class kid from Heywood in Lancashire, and the difference a good teacher can make. Philip Corlett he eulogised, what Manxes are like abroad. He eulogised about the Isle of Man and talked about this wonderful island in the middle of the sea. And it never left Harold, never left him. He became a very high-ranking Martin's Bank manager, went to Manchester, to the big office in Manchester, and that's where he met Margaret Roberts, who was a nurse in Manchester, and she was Manx, and they got married, and when he subsequently retired, built the house on Colby Glen Road, and that's where he lived for the rest of his life. But as well as being a bank manager, he had a life apart from that. He wrote detective novels. He created a character, and he took up the name George Bellairs. He was very much a Francophile in those days when people didn't travel, but he travelled very widely, sometimes with the bank and sometimes on his own of his own finances. But he created a character, and he wrote 6 novels, and a lot of the novels, maybe over 15 or so, were set in the Isle of Man, Phil. When people weren't writing about the Isle of Man, he was. He was published by the Foyle, Christina Foyle was his agent, Foyle's bookshop on Charing Cross Road. But they had book clubs, and he was published by the Thriller Book Club, and he wrote 6 odd novels, and a lot of them were about the Isle of Man, and he loved the Isle of Man. He'd had this imbued in him from being a child. And not only did he write about the Isle of Man, i.e. there was this Inspector Littlejohn from Scotland was brought into the Isle of Man to solve problems.
Yeah.
So it's very much Morse. It's very much dark deeds done in beautiful places. So people were murdered on the prom, and film stars and this, that and the other. People got strangled in the airs. There was always so if there was a problem on the Isle of Man, they called in this guy from Scotland Yard, and he came over. But when he came to the Isle of Man, he stayed with an archdeacon in Grenaby, Archdeacon Kinray, Caesar Kinray. That's where the Caesar came in from, Philip Corlett, which of course was Cooley, Archdeacon Cooley. He was exactly the same, foaming beard, gaiters, the whole, and he lived in the and he had a great relationship with the Archdeacon's housekeeper, Maggie Keggin, and he introduced Manx.
Do you know, it sounds like we need to get you back onto the programme and just do a whole programme about George Bellairs, I think.
Well, I was very privileged a couple of years ago. John Quirk, I think it was in 2016, John Quirk invited me to address the literary festival. And if you go to the Culture Vannin website, I think it's young Franklin recorded the whole thing. He recorded it all. So if you go to the Culture Vannin website, and the lecture was called Murder Most Manx.
Right.
George Bellairs' Murder Most Manx. As I say, he wrote from the 40s to the 70s. He died in 1980. And lots of people around Colby remember him. He was a very genial, mild-mannered man, a bit like old-style bank managers used to be.
Yeah.
And they say that's where he got his eye. I mean, one of the things he wrote, it was very, if I can call them comic dramas, they were straight. And he was very good on financial crime because he'd obviously been a bank manager. He knew all the fiddles, and he knew what financial procedures were. But being an old-style bank manager, he knew how to look into people's eyes and see what they were made of. So his characterizations were, whether they were serious or were comic, and a lot of them were a mixture of both, were spot on. So they're a great read even now. And a lot of the books now, I've been involved for, nearly 20 years with George Bellairs, and we got a lot of the books republished. In fact, the British Library have a series called Vintage Crime. And we've got a couple of them now published. So if you they're on the web, and they're on Amazon, and they're in bookshops as well. So George Bellairs, the guy who lived on the Isle of Man for 20-odd years, is now republished. The Manx ones are coming at the moment. We're trying to make more of a thing about the Manx things, because they're a specialist market, and we want to do more with those. But as I say, he was writing in Manx. So he was putting Manx phrases in the 1940s, which nobody was. And these were
it's fascinating stuff. And you know, again, having a view of what was happening in the Isle of Man back at that time through an author, I think it would be really good to get to read those books, and maybe we could translate some of them into Manx. Who knows?
That'd be great. That'd be fantastic. And Moghrey Jedoonee, you got some clearing up to do there, Phil.
Yes, a little bits of clearing up. I'm not entirely sure that this is clear, but we'll have a go. We've received an email into the studio. The subject was Bol Folliacht, which means the hidden place. So tan Bol Folliacht ons rumse sa taiost croon aspic ons a captain's bar. The hidden place in Ramsey is the mitre in the captain's bar. So I think that's where all the Manx things that I was talking about will be taking place tomorrow afternoon. Also, news just in from a caller. The Peel Centenary Centre apparently are advertising the event, which is taking place this afternoon, as taking place tomorrow afternoon. So just to clear that up, assuming the Shenanigans U website is correct, and we've already heard that there was a slip earlier, but the Celtic Ceilidh, the Celtic Showcase concert is at the Peel Centenary Centre, and that's admission to £10. The Lawrence's Scran and Berlin and Trip will be taking part, I should say, in the Celtic Showcase on today at 3:00. Sadly, we're running out of time, so we won't have time to talk about the rewilding of the Manx uplands. this is a project that I know Martin Perkins MHK has been working on, particularly as a result of the difficulties they've been having with with the goats around Mackald. There was this plan that's been developed in DEFA to rewild the uplands and to introduce a small pack of wolves to hopefully keep the goat numbers down. But we don't have time, unfortunately, to go into the details of that.
Leil Omogen Avril, it's been great.
Good to my head.
This has been Moghrey Jedoonee.